You're lucky you caught me before I shipped out. Just a few more days, and I'd been gone for a few more years. I know. It's a hamlet. That damned cove town where the Sirens made their nest. Only long-time sailors like me know the place exists. You'd think a place on the beach wouldn't have much of anything. But behind those mountains is a whole country. A principality, I hear. Fertile land, but it's closed in by mountains on all sides. Only place with access to the sea is the hamlet. Faren Shire's the proper name, I think. But every sailor I know calls it Port Monster. Every summer, that cove is covered with all sorts of grotesque creatures. Sirens, serpents, whirlpools, even some Scylla here and there. Damned for all eternity, that cove. I can't for the life of me understand why any human would live there in the summer. But there's people who live there all year round. Enough for a hamlet. Little kids to the most wrinkled son of a bitches you'll ever see. It must be religious. I wouldn't know how. I never asked a soul. Don't want to know what kind of crazy exists there. Yes, a whole summer, me and my crew on Port Monster. We got there in late spring, see? 'Cause sailing ain't easy. I could have avoided it if we left in winter, but our seas are never good in the winter. Restless. So many storms. So I protected my men by sailing in spring. Except Mother Sea betrayed us, 'cause we were close to halfway through our voyage, running low 'cause we planned to restock by then. Yet we hadn't arrived to Port Monster. We were close, but it was almost summer, so we didn't want to stop there. But we had to. Stretching out the rations is a surefire path to mutiny. So we docked, and in no time, we were trapped there. The hero. That boy couldn't save the princess. He was all stick and bones and had to carry around a magic tablet because he couldn't hear. Communicating with him was a hassle. Not everyone knows how to write on a fancy tablet. No, he was no hero. Stupid as one, though. To think he charmed his Siren. Yes, he certainly did. That boy. Shawn, that's his name. A good lad. When he wasn't working, he'd look around the ship or spend time with the village kiddies. I think a few members of my crew wanted to adopt him. Way I understand, Shawn is a magical researcher. Crew told me he specializes in tricky creatures like mandrakes and sirens. Creatures that use sound to debilitate their prey. He's deaf, so he doesn't have to use any special magics to get around them. He was invited to Port Monster to take care of the biggest threats, the Sirens. The Sirens are the ones who are always there, every year, every day. Most other sea monsters see. They rarely stay in one place. Most deposit their eggs or mate and move on. Not the Sirens. Even with the special earplugs, you could hear them singing every day and night. Even the locals were always on edge about anyone just looking in the direction of the sea. Bunch of religious zealots. They'd rather be at risk every summer than insult their god. Bloody disgusting. I don't know what he did, but Shawn got the Sirens to leave. What a miracle that he did. Nope. I never involved myself in that debacle.
I was just a tyke when Shawn came to town. Summers were always difficult before he was hired. Pets and men went missing every year, taken away by the monsters in the night. Mama was always so scared when the weather got warm. Of course, we had all sorts of special things gotten from the merchants and the magic academies. Mama's favorite was this cloth she'd tie around all our heads. It'd block out any sounds, and she said it had a protection talisman woven into the cloth, so none of the critters that can come on land would be attracted to us. I remember the aldermen had us attend weekly meetings, the whole village, to recount who disappeared and what items were working. All of us were scared, but we couldn't just leave. Have you ever heard of Muncha, the goddess of resilience? Legend goes, Muncha chose Faren Shire as her home. Well, the whole island is her home, really. Except the monsters are so dangerous, she closed the mountains around the island and only left a small exit so that the humans wouldn't lose contact with the outside world. At least, that's how the story goes. Those who wouldn't live in the protection of the mountains, those are her most loyal followers. Faren Shire, the adults, I guess, they take it as a huge source of pride, staying even when it's so dangerous. It was difficult. Thinking back on it, mutiny was probably on the horizon. No matter how faithful, all people have a limit, and the alderman was definitely pushing that limit. So he called in Shawn. Well, first there were the sailors. Everyone was real confused when they didn't have any monster experts on board. A few days later, Shawn arrives, from behind the mountains. You see, Shawn, the madman, he flew in. The magic school was little dragons. He landed and sent the little bugger home. The man was good with all sorts of animals, I guess. But he walked right into town like he was a local and started showing around his tablet, asking for the alderman. Oh, that's how Shawn talked with us. He had this magic tablet that you could write on. All you had to do was snap your fingers and the words would disappear. I wanted 50. Shawn started work on day 1. I remember him setting up a long line of traps to protect the village first thing. Scary traps. I have no idea how they worked, but they didn't kill anything. Nearly every morning, there was at least one creature all tied up in those scary tentacle-looking things. Some mornings, some of the villagers would be caught up too. Another of the requirements of following Muncha: refrain from killing. You'd think that wouldn't apply to monsters, but nobody was comfortable killing anything humanoid or related to the Sirens. Well, anyway, Shawn knew that, so he never killed any of the monsters. Instead, we had this whole procession of magic researchers coming in and out to transport the things away. See, anyone who doesn't work with sea monsters wouldn't know this, but sirens are the queens of the sea. They can control anything with working ears. So, if you kill their underlings, you're the next target for their thrall. Okay, before I get into the Siren Marmalade, you have to know that we never interacted with the Sirens before her. They kept to their crags, we kept to the village. But we needed them gone. I remember Shawn telling the alderman that he was going to get the Sirens to leave. He's a smart one, that Shawn, because he managed more than that. It started on day 2. Shawn went around borrowing ingredients and pots and started making this weird soup. When I snuck a taste, it was terrible. Turns out the food wasn't for us humans, but for the Sirens. Shawn called it a peace treaty. Well, he left some bowls out at the pier and just waited on the other side of the traps. A merman, those gross fishies with legs, came out and ate first. Do you think sea monsters have poison testers? I bet it was the poison tester. Well, the soup wasn't poisoned, and sure enough, a few Sirens came out to eat, including Marmalade. Shawn was a plain sort, but Marmalade, The sirens are all gorgeous, but Marmalade's hair was this beautiful, bright orange. I never got close enough to tell, but Shawn said her eyes were the color of sea glass. So long as you don't let her open her mouth, you'd think she was only a pretty woman with a fishtail. But those teeth, ugh. Anyway, the food trick was Shawn's strategy for about a week. Most of the monsters, they ate and went back out to sea. Not Marmalade, though. She made all these gestures until someone figured out she wanted seconds. Our favorite madman Shawn would put the pot just over the trap line. Thankfully, the trap line worked both ways, so if she tried to call someone to her, they'd just get caught and kept away from her. Marmalade was forced to crawl her way over and then scoot back to the pier. Eventually, Shawn braved the traps himself to bring the pot closer. That's when Marmalade tried to eat him, but he's deaf. Her music doesn't work on him. She was so confused, he was able to drop the pot and walk back across the trap line, no problem. Isn't that awesome? It's rightfully epic. Marmalade lost interest in anyone other than Shawn after that. Some of the older boys would try to mess with her by showing off empty pots or imitating Siren song, but she wouldn't even look at them. Hell if I know what the other monsters thought about Marmalade taking interest in a human. Maybe it's normal for them. But it became pretty clear that Marmalade was somewhere high on their social chain, because the monsters started keeping their distance whenever Shawn walked over to the trap line. That pier was just for Marmalade and Shawn. Yeah, I guess it's romantic. I never understood the relationship between them, but they were at least friends. You know, I'd forgotten it till now, but Shawn tried to talk with Marmalade. Yeah, he's deaf since birth, though, so anything out of his mouth doesn't sound much like words to us hearing folk. But I think Marmalade understood him, because she would squeak back at him like they were having a real conversation. That's what came after the food, them speaking to each other. You'll have to ask someone else how it worked, but it worked. You could hear them, sometimes at night, calling to each other, especially when Shawn decided to sleep on the boat instead of the inn or with my mama. No idea what they talked about. Well, there was an accident. One of the kids, Bruno, he crossed the monster line. He's still alive, don't worry, but it was pretty scary. It was just, 3 at the time. So he walked right across, and Marmalade grabbed him. Yeah, it was scary, but thankfully his paw noticed immediately. Bruno's paw crossed the line and attacked Marmalade. Things got nasty for a few days after that. I can't remember exactly what was going on, but I remember Shawn stayed with my family for a while and didn't go to see Marmalade. Some new traps were laid out too, sparky ones. More soup, but Shawn stayed on the other side of the line. Things weren't the same between them, not for a few days. Maybe losing her friend like that helped Marmalade understand something about us humans. Because about a week later, Shawn left a hole in the traps. A big hole. Villagers didn't agree with it, of course. I think it's the only time I've seen the whole village armed and ready to fight. But Marmalade only sang. Not a soul crossed that line. Marmalade sang. Her sirens joined her. I think I saw a few creatures come out of the water to see what was going on. But nobody got closer. The next day, the same scene. Shawn kept leaving a big hole during the day, and the sirens just kept singing. And nobody died. The alderman said it was a treaty. It must have been. Because after a week or so of that, Shawn disappeared. Until the end of summer, Shawn was nowhere to be found. The traps were laid out like usual, no holes, and not long after the sailors finally set sail again, Shawn came out of the water. Marmalade carried him to the pier and stayed there while Shawn went to catch us up. Next thing I know, there's a huge celebration. I don't remember all the details, but Shawn got the Sirens and the sea creatures to leave us alone. Mama says they still visit Faren Shire every summer, but there hasn't been any deaths in, 11 years now. I always wondered when someone would come snooping about Shawn and his Siren project. Ask me anything. We have nothing to hide. Well, it's winter now, so Shawn is over in the snowy regions to deal with some bergschra that appeared. They're mostly harmless creatures, so long as humans don't get too close, but you know how us humans are. We stick our noses wherever we want to. So, Shawn and a few colleagues have been sent over. Shawn's underwater project expanded into a research division here. Now that we know communication is possible between humans and non-speaking demi-humans, the world as we know it expanded indefinitely. In just 11 years, we have found 73 new sea creatures, a score of beasts, and have begun understanding the various cultures and languages of underwater societies. It's truly incredible. When Shawn comes back from his current mission, I imagine we'll be getting him ready to make another trip underwater. Yes, at this point, he spends more time in the sea than up here on land. Unfortunately for Marmalade, we still need him up top. Marmalade is fine, as always. She's very smart, that one, so she has no trouble surviving the rough straits that is her culture. It's a shame we still can't communicate with her very well, since we humans can't imitate siren calls. We've been working on translation machines for sirens, among other beasts. Oh, that! Yes, Shawn is able to talk with Marmalade. So are other deaf people we've found. The working theory we have now is that since the deaf aren't as exposed to human languages as the rest of us, they can connect on a, let's say, deeper level to those that rely on magic and other non-verbal ways of communication. That's what made the translation machine hard to crack. Sirens use magic to amplify their calls and convey a huge variety of meanings. We humans only use our words. Shawn has more than words. He has a deep desire to understand and communicate, no matter what stands in his way. That is the key behind his successes. It is incredible. Now, if only he would slow down enough for us to begin the next step of bringing underwater societies into the fold. You see, trade has already begun between those underwater and those above ground. We saw the same happen when airborne societies started interacting with us. In no time at all, more than a few curious plants and foodstuffs will cross the borders. It's imperative that peace is established early on. Treaties are needed, but without adequate translation technology, our options are limited. Well, Shawn isn't so young anymore. Most people his age have already settled down. And what better way to start a peace treaty than by involving the parties who made all this possible? I'm saying, what if we have a marriage treaty?